and welcome to Real Economy. This week the show is in Copenhagen to talk about green growth, and where better to do it than Denmark with its environmentally conscious citizens that set the bar for not just the EU but the rest of the world. On the show today, Jeremy Rifkin, author and advisor to world leaders, talks to us about how a green Europe can create growth and jobs despite a recessionary environment. We then take a look at Denmark's model of public-private cooperation that's making green not just a color, but a way of life, and how they're then selling that way of life to the rest of the world. Surrounded as we are by boats, water and the wind, it's quite easy to think of green as some sort of free-living lifestyle. But this is a serious business that's taking the world into a new global economy. So we decided to get you a crash course on what is green growth.
By 2050, there'll be 9 billion people on Earth. We'll need 80% more energy and will increase our carbon emissions by 50%. This could potentially increase the Earth's temperature and impact our very existence. Green growth aims for sustainable economic growth, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and minimising waste of our natural resources. Green growth means investing money and effort to make cleaner technologies, which help to better manage how we produce and consume what we need in order to live. Globally, eco-industries are set to double to €2 trillion a year. By tapping into that market through investments in research and development and creating new technologies, we ultimately create jobs and therefore growth.
We'll speak to Jeremy Rifkin in a few minutes about Europe's green strategy, but first take a look at the projections for the kind of jobs this industry can create. Greece and Hungary think they can create hundreds of thousands of jobs by 2020, while Spain thinks it can create up to 1 million. So is it possible? Our very own Jeremy Wilks tried on the Danish green lifestyle for size to see if it's a comfortable economic fit for us all.
The Danish green lifestyle looks just like life elsewhere. But here in Copenhagen, homeowner Carl Press Christensen has packed his house with clean energy technology.
First of all, we got solar panels producing more electricity than we can use. We have very much insulation into the walls, below the floor and the roof, so our heat bill is extremely low. And finally, we got a system for collecting rainwater that we use for toilet flushing and washing machine.
Carr is not alone in his green ambition. Copenhagen aims to be CO2 neutral by 2025. Here, just 3% of waste ends up in landfill, and 36% of journeys to home or school are made by bicycle.
Something went seriously right in the state of Denmark. The country is now the world reference when it comes to all things green and clean. 30 years ago, they began to build their first windmills. Now they get 30% of their energy from those lovely turbines in the sky. So what kinds of decisions were made at the parliament behind me to make that happen?
It all started in '73 during the oil crisis, where Denmark was linked completely to oil, and it became very expensive. And it was, there was a very strong economic motivation to do something. By 2020, we want to have a reduction of 40% compared to the 1990 baseline in our carbon emissions. By 35, we want our full electricity and heating sources to come from renewables. And by 50, we want to be carbon neutral.
Danish politics is about coalition and compromise, which isn't the case everywhere in Europe. But the Danes' long-term planning pays off.
I think we have a long tradition, actually, in the Scandinavian countries to regulate. And we've seen with the windmill adventure of the 1990s in Denmark that there are lots of workplaces and lots of economic growth connected to the green transition. That makes it a bit easier for us to make those very ambitious targets.
The kind of sustainable green growth seen in Denmark is something Europe is aiming for by 2020. Getting there brings better security of supply and stimulates growth, according to this lobbyist.
If we're looking at the European Union as we are today, we import around more than 50% of all our energy, like 80% of our oil, 60% of the gas, almost half of all the coal is imported. And that is actually money that could be invested in Europe. Now it's invested in the Middle East or Russia.
For homeowners like Carr, the investment is made. Now it's time to enjoy the rewards.
I caught up with author and advisor to world leaders Jeremy Rifkin and began by asking him, can we replicate Denmark's green model? It works here, but does it translate to other European countries where recession is still top of mind?
Well, what you have to understand, the reason the economy is in trouble and we have rising unemployment and lower productivity and a young generation without jobs is because the second industrial revolution of the 20th century is now sunsetting. That second industrial revolution is based on fossil fuel energies and nuclear power. Those energies are getting more and more and more expensive because they're maturing. So now we're paying the bill for 2 centuries of burning carbon fuels. And climate change is now imperiling our ability as a species to actually survive on this planet in this coming century.
How do you convince governments that are performing austerity measures in Europe to invest the kind of money they need to meet the 2020 targets, but because we don't have a reliable renewable energy source just yet?
In some countries in Europe, wind is now competitive with the old fossil fuels and even cheaper in some places. Solar in many places now is actually in parity, meaning on a par. You have to put this in perspective. Germany has successfully moved this revolution. Yes, the price of electricity is going up a little bit. Nowhere near what people are saying who are supporting the old energy industries. And in terms of subsidies, the old fossil fuel and nuclear industries are still being subsidized massively compared to the tiny subsidies in the new third industrial revolution energies. And the bottom line is this: where do you want to be in 20 years from now? In Denmark, Germany, South Africa, Senegal? Does your country want to be in the dying days of a second industrial revolution whose energies are more expensive, technologies are old, and climate change is killing the planet? Or do you want to be in 20 years from now in the sunrise renewable energies? There's so much money available to do this. We've done master plans for regions already. And when these regions start to move on the 5-pillar third industrial revolution, they have an open door, banking community, the investment community, because we can measure the returns.
If I can ask you the question, then what would you do to strategize to getting to that? Because quite a few things have not worked.
We haven't phased in each pillar at a pace with each other. That's where there are problems if you see losses in Germany and elsewhere. Then we have regions in Europe that are 20, 30, 60, 70% green electricity. But we didn't put the storage in, pillar 3, hydrogen and other storage to store the energies. The sun is intermittent, the wind is intermittent. If you don't store them, you lose 3 out of 4 kilowatts, which is a waste of investment. This is not about isolated projects. It's infrastructure, so you have to shift every region to renewable energies, convert all your buildings to power plants so you can collect the sun, the wind, the heat in the building, then put in storage so you can store these intermittent energies so they're available 24 hours a day, then set up an energy internet from the electricity grid so everyone can share the green electricity across the continent, and then plug in your logistics. Denmark and Germany has shown it can be done.
Budget cuts across Europe, as expected, have impacted the industry. The energy infrastructure package, for example, saw its funding cut. But the push continues. All EU nations must allocate between 12 to 20% of their regional funding to things like measuring energy efficiencies or creating smart grids. Well, Jeremy Wilks really got into the spirit of things and went on a rather green ride into a regional cluster here in Copenhagen.
The people of Denmark just love to share. They share their bike paths, they share their communal heating systems, they share their wind farms, and they also love to share their knowledge in green technology. They do so through organisations like the Copenhagen Cluster. In the past 4 years, the cluster has helped sell Danish cleantech solutions to 10 cities worldwide. So, how did the cluster come about?
The European Commission started by providing an upfront funding of 10 million euros, and then that was supplemented by the funding from the local partners here in Copenhagen. We have created about 700 jobs specifically in the clean tech sector since 2009. And also we have enabled some of the startup companies to go to market from a prototype position.
One of the founding members of the Copenhagen Cleantech Cluster is Rambol, an engineering consultancy with its home in Denmark. It uses its headquarters and the city around it as a showcase of Danish skills in sustainable energy and water technology.
Well, this is Rambol's head office. It is only 3 years old, and we have designed it up to the most advanced design criteria for sustainable buildings. It uses district energy from the power plants in the neighborhood. We have groundwater cooling, and we have a lighting design which is very sustainable, as well as also recycling rainwater.
Rambol has been expanding at 16% a year, helped in part by the growth in the offshore wind industry.
We are today 10,000 people, and we are in 20 countries and have more than 200 offices, mainly in the Nordic region, but also in UK, in Middle East and in India.
That kind of export growth is the key target of the Copenhagen Cleantech Cluster.
We firmly believe that it's not about trying to sell a solution from Denmark and put it, for example, in Mumbai, but it's about trying to co-create an existence or a solution with respect to what is existing in the local conditions there in that part of the world.
Well, that's a recycle wrap on a green real economy from here in Copenhagen. Join us next time to talk about bank lending. Why is it such a hot topic, and how can small and medium companies get the access to the money they need? Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.